I don't know, Steve. Why did Debiki cross the road?
Because he was being chased by a bunch of orcs.
That is a good one. Oh, stop. Log! Welcome back to the Red Ones Go Faster. I'm old Big Mek. This is Steve. And today we're going to talk about the actual most expensive thing in Warhammer and what you could do about it. I'll explain. So yes, indeed, I am old Big Mek. This is the Red Ones Go Faster. And today we are talking about terrain. Now, when it comes to the Warhammer hobby, we all know that it can be quite expensive, obviously, and we tend to think that armies are where the bulk of the money lies. But frankly, I've done enough videos now, and I think enough of you have seen that that's not necessarily true. The armies can be had for cheaper. There are ways around getting it, buying used, things like that. But when it comes to terrain, this is the stuff that really is kind of the most expensive, but also holds its value the most, and also the thing that people get rid of the least, which can be a big problem if you're trying to get into Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, etc., and you don't have terrain. Trying to get some can be kind of a minefield. So let's talk about it a little bit. Starting with this piece right here. Those of you that are old Big Meks like myself and were around way back in 3rd edition immediately recognize this as one of the pieces of runes that came in the 3rd edition starter box. Now, these runes were iconic. They were kind of the first real terrain built for war games by Games Workshop. And they were kind of fantastic. It brought some verticality. It brought a design aesthetic that matched all those wonderful John Blanche artworks. But frankly, they kind of suck. You're going to see like maybe one guy on there on a modern 32 millimeter base, and it doesn't really block all that much. And so terrain has definitely evolved over the years. The problem being it's kind of a flooded market right now, and it's really difficult to ascertain like what is really worth spending your money on. So that brings us to our old friend Steve here. Steve is a skull. He's from a fish tank, hence the holes in him. Now, Steve has been dressed up with some texture paint and some flocking and stuff, but the long and the short of it is this comes from your local pet store. Some of the stuff can be neat depending on what all you do with it. And back in the day, that's actually how we made most of our terrain. When I was playing back in the 90s and early 2000s, I made a ton of terrain out of literal trash and garbage and old toys. I got some big metal like cranes and construction equipment and beat them all up with a hammer and painted them all up and made them all crashed all over the battlefield. You could get some resin, icicles and things like that, and a lot of model railroad stuff, right? You try to put it all together to make a terrain board. That stuff's really hard, and it comes out looking not quite 40K-ish. So, while it's a great first attempt, not really what you want. Then, of course, it is 2023, 3D printing. There are a million pieces of terrain out there that are STL files or 3D prints. Some of them can get as expensive, if not more expensive, than official terrain. Some of them are really nice. Like this particular piece here is from Eon's Battle from their expansion. The problem with this is it all depends on what kind of printer you have, how good you are at printing, and how much money you're willing to spend on it. The old Big Mek only has an FDM printer. It's going to leave the lines everywhere. So he paid for a resin company to do this. I ended up paying more for this terrain than just buying real terrain would be. And frankly, the quality isn't as good. And I'm not alone in this. Don't get me wrong, I have some pieces that are absolutely fantastic. I have some pieces that are absolutely fantastic and weren't that much money. But the vast majority of the pieces are kind of pricey and not as good a quality. Like you can just see on the board, they are resin, they are 3D prints, and they don't necessarily look the greatest. And you got to spend a lot of time cleaning them up in order to get them presentable and ready for the board. So not the best option. As we walk down memory lane here, this was the Mac Daddy. This was the 4th edition starter set, yeah, Battle for McCrag, and it had the first really wild piece of terrain. You can see here on the back, the crashed Aquila lander. Now, this particular box happens to still hold the crashed lander. This kit goes for an absurd amount of money to this day, 20 odd years later. And frankly, it's worth every penny. It is still one of the coolest looking things on a tabletop you can put out there. It's really thematic. It fills up the battlefield. It provides a sense of place, and really that's what terrain is all about, right? When you build an army, right, your paint job uh, really places it in the universe, and by extension, your basing, right, is such a big deal of it. A great basing scheme can make or break an army. We know this. Well, great terrain makes or breaks a battlefield. Yeah, you can use MDF, but it looks like MDF, right? It's pieces of wood cut with a laser that are burned. Even if you paint it, like, it's thin and it's weird looking, resin is resin. Unless you really get super expensive resin, it's gonna look like resin. It's gonna look like 2D prints. Toys are toys. They're gonna look like toys. It'd be, you get this pop-up card things and whatnot. Yeah, they're cool for tournaments or traveling, but really you're playing on a game board. You might as well be playing with Little Green Army Men for all the realism it provides. What you want is the real meal deal, right? You want Games Workshop actual Warhammer terrain. This stuff is so high quality and so nice and so stinking expensive. But you buy it once and then you're done, right? Because you can keep that terrain forever. I have some terrain pieces, honestly. When I got out of Warhammer 6th edition and did not come back until 8th. And, there was a solid almost 10 years there that I didn't play. I had sold all my armies. I kept almost all my terrain. And everything that I got rid of, I regret, right? People don't usually sell their terrain. They don't usually get rid of their terrain. So it's an excellent, excellent investment. If any ever comes and used it like Mindtaker, man, it has gone so fast because everybody wants to go get it to have on their board. So how do you get the terrain kind of relatively cheaply? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. There's a reason why old Big Mek buys lots of Kill Team boxes, because old Big Mek doesn't actually play Guild Team. I don't like skirmish games. I'm an army guy. I want to see tons of units, tanks, vehicles, right? Cool stuff. But Kill Team boxes come with terrain, specifically really, really good terrain. Octarius is some of the best terrain Games Workshop has ever made. And I mean, just look at that. It's so thematic and it looks so good out on the battlefield, and fighting over it is so much fun. It like really immerses you in Warhammer 40,000. So those Kill Team boxes are a great way to build your terrain collection. Unfortunately, we're in a little bit of a weird spot right now where there's not really any Kill Team boxes available outside of the Gallowdark stuff, which is all the interiors of a Space Hulk, and there's not a whole lot of terrain sets out there. So that brings me to some recommendations. Here we go. So first off, we have the new Ultimate Starter set. Now, this set is, quite pricey. I believe it's over $200 on the Games Workshop store. Here we have it, for quite a bit cheaper, which I'll have a link down in the description below so you too can get it for this price. But the important thing is it's $100 more expensive than the basic starter. And the only difference is you get the terrain, which is this right here. This is a kind of a hab bunker thing and some walls and some wall ends and barricades. And it doesn't seem like much, but when you look at what $100 gets you worth of terrain, you start to see why. So this is a $200 upgrade for Nakmund. Again, this came in a Kill Team set, an excellent one with Phobos Marines that you can't get anymore. That box, I think, sold for less than this, and you got almost everything, if not everything, in there. Now you're starting to see why the Kill Team stuff is such a good deal. Now, you can buy some terrain things and go from it. I showed you some of these gantries just now. $58 again through the affiliate link. You get some gantries. Not a bad deal, not a great deal, but not a bad deal. The big thing on these is it gives you some verticality. There's other pieces out there such as the landing pad, which is pretty cool, but ultimately is just a big box. The stockade, which again is a big box and then an open box, but hey, at least you can stand some guys up inside of it and defend it, and then you've got that Auspex Shrine and Frontiers thing. So as you see, you can actually piece together that Nakmund set with individual pieces for maybe a little bit less than the actual set, but if you add them up, there's 40, there's 88, there's 120, 130 something dollars, versus just buying that, right? Yeah, it's $178, but you've gotten more terrain, and your you know, your 40 extra bucks is basically buying you a couple of armies. Now, there are some cool pieces out there that I do want to point out. This one is pretty cool. This is the Mechanicus Forge Shrine. This is actually designed to put a knight in front of, or like one of the little mini titans, for the Mechanicus guys to work on, or like where the knight sleeps, which makes for a really cool thematic piece of terrain, even if you don't own a knight. Again, lots of verticality, lots of continuity between that and some of the other pieces. Not a bad deal at 50 bucks. There's also this slightly different, bigger version, the Galvanic Magnavent. So this has a big, tall, kind of a industrial thingy on it, with a smokestack and some pieces that go around. Now, the cool thing about this is you don't have to assemble it like this, and you don't have to assemble it all as one piece either. You can leave these pieces separate so that you can rearrange as needed. You combine those with the gantryways here, and you can actually make, you know, pretty cool terrain. There's also like the munitorium containers with all the little barrels and stuff. Now, this is the kind of thing that 3D printing is okay for. If you get some 3D printed barrels or some cheap resin casted barrels and ammo crates, they're going to look fine. You know, you muck them up, you throw some bullet holes in them, no one's going to really care. Same thing with the containers. They're just kind of boxes. It's not really the same thing. So to me, this is a great deal. That is, you know, kind of one place where 3D printing does come in really nicely. What I want to bring to your attention is that very excellent Kill Team Octarius scenery, remember, can be had for quite cheap right now. It's less than 80 bucks. And again, there's a link down in the description. And this includes everything that was in the Octarius set, literally. So you get the 4 pieces of Orc habitat terrain, the bridges, all the little scatter pieces, and the big oil pump. Again, all for 80 bucks. This would fill up just about an entire battlefield for you know, at least 1,000-point games of 10th edition quite nicely. And you can double these up and they look fine because it's orky. You know, you can cut and splice things, glue extra pieces on them, make them look different, even just paint them a different color, and it's going to look good. So to me, this is the clear winner in cheap terrain buying. The one other thing that I do want to point out is that Games Workshop does make other boxes that can be used for it. Obviously, the Necromunda is the best kind of one to get those, but those boxes are really expensive, and again, that terrain holds its value, maybe even more. But some of this Warcry stuff is not bad. Now, this isn't going to fit every table, but if you are a Chaos player, for example, especially if you have Chaos Cultists, this would work great for Chaos Cultists to have a little thing that they're doing. And I mean, can't you see Gaunt's Ghost, you know, coming up to raid this thing and get rid of all the cultists on it? I mean, that'd be pretty rad. And then that price is much easier to swallow, especially for the amount of terrain that you get compared to that where you get a box and some walls. So yeah, those are my tips on terrain. So let me know, what do you guys use? Are you shopping the pet store and using the fish tank stuff? Are you still rocking really old school runes? Are you doing the 3D print things? Are you doing resin stuff, MDF, little pop-up cardboards? What is it that you're using? What do you prefer and why? And, you know, outside of the links below, if there's other ways to save money on terrain, if that's something that you're interested in, or trying scratch building, anything like that, pop a comment and let me know. And old Big Mek can dive a lot further and deeper into terrain in some of these videos. So anyways, that's been your first look at the most expensive part of the Warhammer hobby and a couple of ways that you could save some teeth on it. And until next time, have a good wog. Ah!